In this video, we'll be taking a look at 3 NFL games happening on December 25th, 2025, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 6 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 3 NFL games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start: if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Dallas Cowboys versus Washington Commanders. Merry Christmas, everyone. Santa went heavy this year, handing us 3 NFL games to snack on. Sure, on paper these matchups are not exactly poster material, but football is still football, and the early game has the Cowboys heading to Landover, Maryland, to square off with the Commanders at Northwest Stadium. Dallas comes into this one already out of the playoff picture after that rough loss to the Chargers on Sunday, but Dak Prescott and the rest of this offense are not exactly built to coast through a nationally televised game. They just finished a stretch where they knocked off last season's Super Bowl teams in the span of 5 days, which still feels wild when you think about the pressure of that schedule and all the noise around the franchise. And even in defeat last week, Prescott quietly put together a very solid line against that usually stingy Los Angeles defense, throwing for 244 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, which is the kind of game that tells you the passing attack is still humming even while the season itself is wobbling. Now he gets a Washington defense that is allowing the most passing yards per attempt in the league at 8.3, and he already hung 3 touchdowns on this secondary in a 44-22 beatdown the last time these teams met, so you do not have to squint too hard to imagine him carving them up again while everyone at home is juggling wrapping paper and red zone replays. On the other side, while this matchup is technically a home game for the Commanders at Northwest Stadium, the quarterback situation tilts the mood quite a bit. With Marcus Mariota dealing with a couple of injuries, Washington will likely have to turn to veteran Josh Johnson to run the show, and that is not nothing. He has been around the block enough times to at least keep the offense functional. There is actually a path for him to put up some numbers too, because the Cowboys defense has been giving up chunk plays all year and sits near the very bottom of the league in passing yards per attempt allowed, which means there should be windows if he is comfortable and the protection holds up. The problem is that this Commanders offense has spent most of the season feeling underwhelming and stop-start, and it is tough to suddenly trust a banged-up, backup-led unit to stay fully competitive on a short week against a Dallas attack that has stayed strong, kept its rhythm, and generally moved the chains with a lot more ease than Washington has managed. As our first pick for this matchup, the Dallas Cowboys to win and cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. From a style perspective, Dallas does not really slam the brakes once it has a lead. It keeps the ball in the air, keeps trusting the quarterback and the receivers, and that mindset feeds high totals because you do not get that sleepy 3 runs and a punt script that can suffocate scoring at a number this big. On the other side, even if Washington is down to backups under center, those backups still have to throw when they are chasing the game, and pressured quarterbacks behind shaky protection tend to create one of 2 things: long completions or ugly turnovers, both of which quietly help anyone holding an over ticket. Honestly, when a defense sits near the bottom of the league in yards allowed and has spent week after week missing tackles, as Washington has, pure effort rarely bails it out, and that kind of profile usually means even stalled offenses eventually stumble into points. Dallas, for its part, is not exactly a vintage shutdown group either, ranking near the basement in both yards and points allowed, so even a depleted Commanders offense has room to find a couple of scoring drives just by staying on schedule and taking free yards when coverage busts show up. Weather-wise, Christmas in the D.C. area is forecast to be chilly but manageable, with temperatures around the low 40s and only a small chance of precipitation, which means you are not fighting the kind of wind or sideways rain that usually drags a passing game into the mud at this total. Put all of that together and you get a game script where the stats, the tendencies, and even the likely game flow are all pointing in the same direction, toward a scoreboard that keeps lighting up into the 4th quarter instead of freezing into some conservative, low-scoring grind. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Detroit Lions versus Minnesota Vikings. Detroit is trying to pick itself up off the mat after that 29-24 gut punch against Pittsburgh, and now has to walk into Minnesota on Christmas Day needing everything to break right just to stay alive in the NFC playoff race. The math is brutally simple. They need to win out, and they need Green Bay to lose out. That is not exactly a cozy holiday scenario. Here is the thing. I do think Detroit can get the straight-up win here, so this can still be step one in the miracle path. But asking them to cover a big number on the road against a division rival that is still playing with pride feels like pushing your luck a bit. You can almost feel the line shaded toward the team that has more to play for, which is usually when the favorite can burn you. Detroit is still the better roster from top to bottom, and emotionally, there is way more urgency on its sideline. The problem is that the offense does not feel as explosive as it did in past seasons, and the defense keeps leaving the back door wide open. Since November, Detroit is just 1-3-0 against the spread when laying 7 or more points, and 2 of those have turned into outright losses. So they have not just failed to cover, they have face planted as big favorites. Minnesota, on the other hand, is out of the playoff picture, but that has not translated into a team that has mailed it in. They have rattled off 3 wins in a row, and that kind of small heater often reflects a locker room that is still locked in. There is a bit of that nothing-to-lose vibe, which can be annoying if you are holding a ticket on the big favorite. The write-up notes that Minnesota already beat Detroit as a huge underdog once this season, and also mentions Detroit surviving 31-29 in Minnesota during the regular season. Those two statements clash a bit, since both outcomes cannot belong to the same game. Setting that aside, the broader angle is that Minnesota has handled the role of big dog reasonably well. They are 2-1-0 straight up as an underdog of 7 or more points since 2023, which tells you they have already punched above their weight a few times. They still profile as one of the stronger defensive units in the league, and that alone gives them a path to keep things tight against a Detroit team that feels like it is sliding rather than surging. Having the hook on top of a key number just adds a little comfort to the underdog side, especially in a game that screams late sweat. And quarterback health is the other piece that matters for the spread. Minnesota quarterback J.J. McCarthy exited last week's win over the Giants with a hand issue, but his x-rays were negative and he is listed as questionable. From the sound of it, he has a fair chance to suit up. If he is good enough to go, that gives Minnesota a very realistic shot to remain competitive for 4 quarters. Meanwhile, Detroit feels off kilter. After starting the season 4-1-0, they have stumbled to 4-6-0 over their last 10 games, which lands them at 8-7-0. That is not the record of a team peaking as the playoffs approach. The last trip these two made to this stadium ended 31-29 in favor of Detroit, and both sides were arguably playing better football then than they are now. So another one-score finish feels very much in play, and if it is a one-score game, the big underdog has the right side of the number. As our first pick for this matchup, the Minnesota Vikings to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Detroit's offense, for all the talk about it being a little less explosive than its peak, is still putting numbers on the board. They have averaged 32 points across their last 5 games, which is the kind of output that can carry an over almost by itself if the opponent contributes at all. That is not a unit stuck in the mud. That is a group still moving the ball and finishing drives. Minnesota's defense, while solid in structure, has not exactly been airtight on the scoreboard lately either. They have given up 23 or more points in 3 of their last 5. So you have one team that is regularly hitting 30+ and another that has allowed north of 23 fairly often, and you can see where this is going. Games like that tend to turn into who gets the last stop, rather than who can drag this into a slugfest. The injuries in Detroit's secondary only add fuel to the offensive fire. They are still missing 2 of their best defensive backs, Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph. Without them, the back end has been leaky. Detroit has allowed 30 or more points in 3 of its last 5 contests and has given up an average of 31.5 points in that span. So while the offense is doing its part, the defense is doing the over no favors either. You almost get a shootout profile baked in. One team scores, the other answers, repeat. We also have some recent history between these specific rosters and schemes to lean on. In the first meeting between these two last month, the total went over by 3.5 points. That tells you the matchup itself did not suppress scoring, even when both sides had a fresh look at each other. On top of that, the over is a perfect 5-0 in Detroit's last 5 games. So you have a hot over streak, a strong scoring average for Detroit, a defense that is bleeding points, and a previous head-to-head that already cleared the number. It is not hard to imagine both offenses finding success again, with drives extending and red zone trips turning into touchdowns more often than field goals. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Denver Broncos versus Kansas City Chiefs. Judging by what we saw in Week 16, it really looks like Kansas City has emotionally checked out of this season. 1 week after Patrick Mahomes tore his ACL and the playoff dream evaporated, the Chiefs followed up with a flat, almost lifeless effort. They started with journeyman Gardner Minshew, who exited after just 8 pass attempts with what appeared to be another serious knee injury. Then 3-year bench warmer Chris Oladokun took over, and the outcome on offense went pretty much how you would expect. Kansas City finished with only 9 first downs and 133 total yards, which is rough in any context and even worse when you remember they were not facing an elite defense. Big names like Travis Kelce with 1 catch for 6 yards and Xavier Worthy with 2 grabs for 41 yards barely moved the needle. The defense does not have the same injury excuse, yet it looked just as lifeless on the stat sheet. Tennessee, one of the weakest offenses in the league, managed 22 first downs and 376 total yards. For a team that has been in 3 straight Super Bowls, that kind of showing feels jarring and honestly a little sad. Denver was not exactly a model of dominance last Sunday either. They have built a reputation this year for late-game comebacks, with memorable wins against the Eagles and Giants, but none of that magic showed up against Jacksonville. The Jaguars walked into Denver with a clean, focused plan and executed it. They went 8 of 15 on 3rd down, racked up 22 first downs, and were up 31-17 going into the 4th quarter after capitalizing on some ugly Broncos turnovers. Jacksonville's defense did its part too, putting steady pressure on Bo Nix and forcing 2 big mistakes, 1 interception and 1 fumble, that swung the entire feel of the game. They also held Denver to 5 of 14 on 3rd down and completely snuffed out the usual late surge from Nix. So last Sunday did not look like the Broncos version we have gotten used to on either side of the ball. But Week 17 sets up as a great chance for them to reset. Kansas City has nowhere else to go at quarterback, which makes it very likely that Oladokun gets another start. Normally you would tread lightly with a road favorite in a divisional matchup, especially in a stadium that has been as loud and hostile as Arrowhead, but this one feels different. Denver is still chasing the #1 seed and the top spot in the division, and that kind of goal keeps a team sharp. The Broncos coming off that tough loss to Jacksonville still very much in the hunt, sitting at 5-2 on the road and showing all year that they can find ways to win even when they are not playing clean football. The Chiefs, on the other hand, have not dealt with a season like this in about a decade, and after last week's loss to Tennessee, it is fair to wonder how much fight is really left. Laying a big number with a team that has been in a lot of close games is always a bit nerve-wracking, and that concern is real here. Even so, backing Kansas City with Oladokun running the offense is an even tougher sell. On a short week, with Denver still motivated and Kansas City stuck in a lost season, the matchup tilts toward the Broncos handling their business as favorites. As our first pick for this matchup, the Denver Broncos to win and cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. If you are expecting points in this contest, the logic pretty much has to start with Denver's offense. They are coming off a humbling loss to Jacksonville and now have to travel to Kansas City just 4 days later to play on Christmas, which is not exactly the post-loss getaway anyone in that locker room had in mind. Still, they do get to face a Chiefs defense that completely folded last week, making the Titans look like one of the sharpest attacks in the league with 26 points and almost 400 yards of offense. At the same time, Kansas City has a long history of being prideful on defense, especially in front of their own fans, and that usually leads to a bounce-back effort rather than a repeat collapse. Arrowhead is rarely friendly to visiting offenses, and we already saw that in a recent trip when Denver managed only 260 total yards and 14 points there. That kind of environment, paired with the coaching staff's response to getting embarrassed, points toward a more disciplined and stingy night from the home defense. On the other side of the ball, the Chiefs are in a brutal spot. Minshew appears to have suffered a serious knee or leg injury, with early word pointing toward a torn ACL. That means an extremely inexperienced Oladokun is likely to start again, now facing a Denver defense that is coming off a performance it will not be proud of. The Broncos are very capable of making life miserable for a young quarterback, sitting second in the league in sack percentage, and they will surely lean into that strength. Kansas City's saving grace is still Andy Reid's offensive mind and the lack of film on Oladokun. That combination can create some surprise wrinkles. Even so, with such an inexperienced passer and a run game that has been below average, it is hard to see the Chiefs calling an aggressive, wide-open script. They are more likely to keep things basic, protect the football, and ask the defense to keep them in it. That kind of conservative approach naturally suppresses scoring. Bo Nix, for his part, has been up and down. Calling his play erratic is fair. Now he has to handle a short week on the road against a Chiefs defense that should be locked in to redeem itself after a poor showing. There is no real reason to expect Kansas City to simply roll over at home in a standalone spot, even if the season storyline is ugly. That hunger on defense, combined with their limitations on offense, actually feeds the case for a low-scoring game rather than a shootout. Denver's defense also has the tools to drag the total down. They are fired up after what they allowed against Jacksonville and are excellent in several important areas. They have held 8 opponents to 20 or fewer points this season, including a game against Kansas City when Mahomes was at quarterback. Now they get a version of this offense that is far less dangerous, with a green passer and a staff that probably wants to shorten the game. The trend backs it up too. The under is 9-1-0 in Kansas City's last 10 games. That is not a tiny sample. That is a full season's worth of evidence that their games have leaned toward lower totals. Weather offers a small twist. It should be unseasonably warm in Kansas City on Thursday, in the 60s and clear, which sounds like an over-friendly setup on the surface. However, wind is expected to pick up as the night goes on, and that kind of breeze can make throwing more difficult for both quarterbacks. Between a cautious Chiefs offense, a motivated Broncos defense, and a home unit that should restore some pride, it is hard to pinpoint where consistent scoring is supposed to come from. This feels like the kind of matchup that finishes with a score in the neighborhood of 17-3, not a fireworks show. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.